Hi, welcome to my video essay on the amazing adventures of Kavalier Clay by Michael Chabon. So I really enjoyed this book. It's definitely, I think, in my top 5 books ever, and I really like the take that it has on the historical narrative, and I think it works so well as a historical narrative because it's a narrative that we don't get to see very often. A person who actually escaped a Nazi-controlled country before World War II and is kind of dealing with the effects of that. I think it's really fascinating to see, and I think the way that Chabon connects like actual historical events with like this weaving of Joe and Sammy's fictional storyline really makes the story feel a lot more real and feel almost more like relatable to what we actually know about history rather than just seeing a fully fictional narrative. And I think that especially the connection to the comic book industry, which was so Jewish during World War II and post-World War II, that I think it really helps bring that connection to like the real superheroes that we know about. And when you see the way that they were created to fight Nazis and fight Hitler in this like metaphorical way, but also in a real tangible way for these Jewish men to like fight back at Nazis and Hitler, I think is just really nice to see in the book. And I was listening to the book on audiobook for at least parts of it, and the real accents I think helped me get super more like into the historical narrative, so I really liked that part about it too. And so for this video essay, I was just going to go over some of the moments that I think best exemplified how weaving in the historical narrative really made this book make a lot more emotional impact than it otherwise would have, and also why it worked so well for the storyline. And so the moment early on in the novel when Josef is still in what was at the time Czechoslovakia, and he says when the situation in Prague was undoubtedly bad as it was going to get, that like was just a moment that I think of weaving of you, the person reading it, feel like you're in on this horrible secret because it's like you know what's actually going to happen, whereas the characters don't. And that's one thing that I really do like about historical narratives and why I think Chabon understands like what he's trying to do so well, because you know that it's going to get much worse, but the characters themselves don't. And there are a lot of moments of this. Chabon includes heart-wrenching historical moments, but I also really like how there are some hopeful ones too. So it's not just completely bogged down by like this deeply saddening, bittersweet moments, but the hopeful moments feel so real as well, which is also I feel like something that you don't get in World War II fiction a lot. And with the historical like comic book industry moments, it felt so immersive. And again, I really liked to see like the fighting of Nazism, both outside of the United States and within it, with the fighting like the literal Nazis that lived in the United States, which is also something that World War II fiction doesn't address very often. And one moment that I particularly liked, one description I particularly liked, was when Chabon describes Joe's depiction of Hitler getting clocked in the jaw, because it just felt like I was staring at a Jack Kirby Captain America like comic book, and it just felt so real, and it was just a larger connection to the Jewish comic book industry. And I really like how the weaving of historical moments made Sammy and Joe feel important to history, which is so nice, because even though they weren't real, they are like so important. These depictions are important. And I really like how they started to interact with real historical figures. It felt like a metaphor both for Sammy and Joe becoming important, but also comic books rising in respect in the art world and things like that. And I really like how this is also Sammy, like the party with the historical figures is also like Sammy's opportunity to see two men in a romantic situation together for the first time. And this is kind of his like introduction to like queer society at the time, and this introduction to like almost like being allowed to be queer, even if this is kind of like taken back in the quote unquote like fairy raids of the time. So it just felt very like, I don't know, these moments of importance that made these characters feel more real and more important. And moving back to like the heavier topics, the heavier topics are rooted in these real historical facts that make everything so much sadder, and the emotional moments hit so much harder, which I think is just so important for a historical fiction novel. I feel like a lot of times historical fiction specifically, not historical narratives, rely on a person having this understanding of history for the emotional moments to hit. But even if you didn't know anything about World War II history, I think that Kavalier and Clay would still be emotionally devastating, because Chabon is so good at weaving in these real moments and explaining that they happened and why they happened. And he's so good at that, that even if I didn't know anything about World War II, and even if I wasn't a history major, I think I would still feel so emotionally devastated by this book. And the whole Joe and Thomas situation is so real and so devastating that it just makes every single Joe moment after Thomas dies just so, I don't know, like bittersweet and so like emotionally devastating, especially because it was the historical reality for so many Jewish people trying to escape Nazi-occupied countries, like dying at sea, and the survivor's guilt that Joe feels for actually getting to the United States is so real. And according to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum encyclopedia page, while the USA did provide the most visas out of all like non-Nazi occupied countries to Jewish immigrants, they still didn't use up all their visas. And at times they even denied that the Holocaust was even happening, or that the Jewish population was really in that much danger. And I just really hate how a lot of times, even in World War II, like fiction, the USA is kind of portrayed as the savior of the Jewish population, but the USA was not the savior of the Jewish population. They really, really weren't. They were not helping a lot in the early stages. Like I said, there were, quite frankly, quite a few Nazi organizations within the United States that the United States government did nothing to stop or suppress until they realized how bad it was in Germany. And it's like, it shouldn't have taken how bad it was in Germany for you to realize that these were hate groups. It's so infuriating. But just all of those moments of like Joe and Thomas not really ever getting to see each other again, and Joe never getting to read his mom's letter. I had to take a walk when Thomas died. I fully had to put the book down and take a walk and leave for a minute and just be like, I can't deal with this right now. And I think it hurt so much more that he was just a kid who dealt with so much, whose brother paid for 15 other kids to be brought back to the United States because it was the right thing to do, and he knew it needed to be done. And he just died at the bottom of the ocean for no other reason besides cruelty. It was cruelty for cruelty's sake. And on page 401, at least page 401 of my copy, the German leader who okayed the attack on the ship said, "They were children, we were wolves." That moment like hurt so much because, like I said, it's just cruelty for cruelty's sake. He's just saying, who cares if they were children? We were wolves and we were going to win. But the fact that they were children is always going to matter. And German U-boats really did attack and circle around the New Jersey coast, according to NPR. So these are real things that happened, and real people died. And it's just, I just really like everything that Chabon chose to include in the novel, and all the moments felt so much more emotionally just heart-wrenching and devastating, but also like hopeful at times. The book, despite how emotional it was at other points, felt so hopeful at other times, that this weaving of different emotions I think only works because it's so rooted in actual historical fact. And this book is so like chock full of them, I can't really take the time to discuss all of them that I would like to discuss. And I kind of focused more on the like Jewish perspective of like Joe and Sammy and Joe and like Thomas's relationship, mostly because a lot of the different historical moments and the different historical perspectives deserve entire video essays or papers of their own. But I did just want to mention them really quick. Just all of Rose's storyline is rooted in so much like the reality for women at the time that's like, I hate to say that I was surprised that Chabon was able to write like this so well and so respectfully, but I was also a little surprised because I've read plenty of men not understanding historical women's storylines, that to see Chabon handle it with, quite frankly, a lot of grace, I really like to see. And of course, there was all of Sammy's journey as a gay man that was extremely important and does deserve a video of its own, but his entire relationship with Bacon and the implication of Bacon being Tracy's last name and the love that they so clearly had for each other even until Tracy died, and the fact that Sammy left him on the train. It just all is so much and is so important, and I'm so thankful that Chabon wrote this book and that I got to read it, because it's definitely going to stick in my mind forever, and there's so moments that I'm never going to be able to forget. So thank you, and thank you for watching this video.